This is perhaps the most famous passenger ship in the world, the RMS Titanic. The ship, dubbed the Millionaire's Special, at a length of 895 feet and an advertised displacement of 46,000 tons, makes her the largest, newest, and most luxurious ocean liner of the time. Although her owners, the White Star Line, never claim this, some maritime publications state that the Titanic is practically unsinkable due to her modern construction, incorporating 16 individual watertight compartments, which can be closed off from the bridge electrically with the flip of a switch. The story of her tragic voyage begins on Wednesday, April 10th, 1912. Titanic departs from the docks in Southampton, England, at 12 noon on her maiden transatlantic crossing, bound for New York City in the United States. On board are 2,240 passengers and crew. Titanic's captain, Edward J. Smith, a man with over 35 years' experience at sea, decides to steer a more southerly course to avoid the usual icebergs found in the shipping lanes of the Atlantic during this time of the year. The spring of 1912 has been unusually warm, and unbeknownst to Captain Smith, field pack ice and large dangerous icebergs have been swept further south than normal by the strong Labrador current, and now lay directly in his ship's path. In the following days, both passengers and crew are enjoying life aboard the Titanic, while taking in warm sunny skies and smooth gentle seas. They are all blissfully unaware of the danger that lies ahead. It is now Sunday, April 14th. The weather is fair and sunny in the morning, but by mid-afternoon it becomes increasingly colder. Senior Marconi operator Jack Phillips and his assistant, Harold Bride, have been working in Titanic's wireless room virtually around the clock, sending and receiving hundreds of messages from passengers and those ashore who are enamored with the new technical marvel of the wireless telegraph. Over the last few days, several warnings of field ice and large bergs are received from various ships traveling the transatlantic route. Put together, the warnings would have given Captain Smith a clear indication on his course chart that Titanic would most likely come upon the ice at some point on Sunday evening. However, some of the messages warning of ice never made it to the attention of the officers in command on Titanic's bridge. It seems hard to believe today, but at that time aboard Titanic, the wireless operators Phillips and Bride were not required by orders to deliver all messages regarding ship navigation to the captain. Wireless operators Phillips and Bride were not official members of Titanic's crew and not paid by the White Star Line. They were, in fact, employees of the Marconi Company, which operated as a separate entity aboard the ship. So it was the policy of the time that delivery of such messages was considered only as a courtesy. It's now shortly after 10 p.m. ship's time, and Second Officer Charles Herbert Lightoller is in command on Titanic's bridge. Captain Smith arrives, having returned from a party given in his honor for his upcoming retirement. The two men discuss the ship's watch, and Lightoller informs the captain that the water temperature has dropped to just above freezing. He's ordered the ship's carpenter to monitor the freshwater tanks to prevent them from freezing as well. The conversation then turns to the weather. They are aware of possible ice, but have assumed by way of reports that it's well to the north of the ship's course. Lightoller comments about the moonless night and unusually calm seas. He notes that the conditions will make it more difficult to spot icebergs, due to the lack of light and breaking waves that make them more visible while crashing at their base. Captain Smith agrees. He then informs Lightoller that he will be just inside his cabin, and to inform him immediately if conditions become at all doubtful. The time? Just before 11:40 p.m. as Titanic races through the night at just over 20 knots, very close to her top speed. First Officer William Murdoch is now in command on Titanic's bridge. It's been an uneventful watch. High above in the ship's crow's nest, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee are braving the wind and the cold as they peer ahead into the dark night. Suddenly, Fleet sees a huge object looming ahead, blocking out the stars of the horizon. And Titanic is headed straight for it. Fleet immediately sounds the ship's bell with 3 sharp rings to alert the bridge. At almost the same time, he calls over the crow's nest telephone to report the danger. After a few desperate moments, the bridge finally answers. "What did you see?" "Iceberg dead ahead," he shouts. "Thank you," is the calm reply. At the starboard bridge wing, Murdoch apparently spots the massive berg just as the bell rings and orders the helm hard a starboard, engines full speed astern. In the dark bridge wheelhouse, Quartermaster Robert Hitchens hears the order, and though somewhat startled, he steers the ship's wheel hard over. For long seconds it seems as though nothing happens, and then slowly, Titanic's bow begins to swing. But it's too late, and the ship strikes the huge berg, taking the blow on her starboard bow. Chunks of ice cascade onto the forward well deck as the berg scrapes along Titanic's side. On the bridge, First Officer Murdoch orders the helm hard to port in an attempt to steer Titanic's stern clear. It's doubtful that this maneuver had much of an effect, as Titanic is simply too large and moving too fast. The sounds of the crash had barely faded as Captain Smith rushed onto the bridge. "What have we struck?" he asked his first officer. "An iceberg, sir," replied Murdoch. "I tried to port round it, but it was too close, and we hit." Captain Smith orders the still straining engines to a full stop. Down below, second-class passenger Lawrence Beasley, a British schoolteacher, is in bed reading a book. He's become used to the sound and feel of Titanic's engines as they operated with a steady beat over the last several days. As he later recalled, "I was in my cabin reading when I heard a distinct change in the sound of the ship's engines. Nothing violent, mind you, only a slow fading off until they were completely stopped. I neither heard or felt the force of the collision." In Boiler Room 6, it was a completely different experience for leading stoker Fred Barrett. It was near the end of my shift when suddenly I could hear the sound of a distant roar. The sound grew closer and louder, and then the whole side wall appeared to open up, and a massive surge of seawater came pouring in. We all scrambled up the ladders for our safety. Once there, and after we regained our thoughts from the shock, the talk was that we must have run aground of Newfoundland. Back on the bridge, Captain Smith needed to know how badly his ship was damaged. Titanic had been steaming with a list of a few degrees to her port side for most of the run. But now within minutes after the impact, the gauge was showing an increasing list to her starboard. Without being asked, Fourth Officer on the bridge, Joseph Boxall, decides to go below to inspect the ship. Here in his own words.
Whilst the captain was talking to Murdoch at the starboard wing of the bridge, I slipped down to go forward and have a look to see if I could find any damage. Nobody told me to go. You had to go down about 4 bridge ladders, you see. And I went forward to the entrance to the third class. These third class passengers, Southern European people, were streaming up on deck, and I went down below. I think it was 2 decks down, as low as I could go without removing any hatches or anything. I went down to the third class, crossed over to the starboard side, and I walked along there and looked in the cross passages. I couldn't hear any noise. I couldn't see any damage. And I eventually came up on deck again. As I was emerging on the deck, some of these men were on their way back again to their beds. And there was one man had a piece of ice, and I took it away out of his hands, wondering where he got it from. And I spoke to him in English and tried to make him understand that there was nothing the matter. Go down and go to bed and go to sleep again, you see. And I took this piece of ice and walked along the upper deck on the starboard side to see where the ice came from. And there, just inside of the ship's rail, there was a powdering of ice running along as though she'd compressed it. There was no wind, you see, and it would fall inboard. I came up onto the bridge again and reported to the captain, "I've been down below, sir, right down as far as I could go without removing hatches or tarpaulins, right through a third-class accommodation forward. And I don't see any signs of any damage, not even a glass port broken." He said, "Did you see the carpenter anywhere, Mr. Boxall?" I said, "No, sir, I didn't." He said, "I do wish you would go down and find him and tell him to sound the ship round for and let me know right away." Well, I didn't get down all the ladders down to the foredeck. I met the carpenter coming up, absolutely out of breath, and he said, "Mr. Boxall," he said, "the forepeak hatch is blown off and number 1 tarpaulin is ballooning up." He said, "She's evidently making water fast." So I said, "All right, go along, carpenter. The captain is on the starboard wing of the bridge, and tell the captain." I didn't get down to the foredeck because I met a mail clerk coming up. And he said, "Mr. Boxall, the mail room's filling." So I said, "Oh, carry on, and you'll find the captain on the starboard wing of the bridge and report to him." I said, "I'll go down there and have a look." So I continued on my way down to the mail room. I tried to go into the first class entrance from that lower deck, from the foredeck, but they'd got the watertight door closed. I had to come up all these ladders and go up over the promenade deck and then down through the main saloon entrance, where I found the band was beginning to tune up. And I got my way down to the mail room, and I got down as far as the sorting room. And all the mail clerks were there pulling letters out of the racks. And I was standing on the top of a companionway from the sorting room down to the handing room. And I saw a bag floating by. I instinctively stooped down to try and pick it up. I just couldn't reach it. I realized then that it was serious. So I started to come back again. When I got to the first-class passenger accommodation, I met one of the assistant stewards. And he said, "Mr. Boxall, shall I send some men down there?" I said, "I think you'd better not. I'll go up and report this to the bridge, and we'll send down and let you know." As I came up through the top lounge where the band was, they were playing Alexandra's Ragtime Band. And I got back to the boat deck and saw the captain. And I told him, I said, "The mail room's filling, sir."
It's at about this time that Thomas Andrews arrives with the captain. Andrews is the chief designer of the Titanic and knows the ship better than anyone aboard. "We've struck a berg, and I think she's badly damaged," says Smith. "Well, I'll go down and have a look," replies Andrews. After a short time, he returns to the bridge to inform the captain of his findings. In the chart room, Andrews shows Captain Smith the ship's blueprint and explains that damage has occurred in Titanic's first 5 forward compartments, and she's taking water in all of them. Andrews goes further. "The pumps can't keep up with the flooding, Captain. As a result, the water will take the Titanic down by the bow due to the weight. The water will then overflow the remaining bulkheads, and Titanic will sink. The news stuns Captain Smith. Who could possibly know the thoughts he must have had at that moment? How would he face a challenge far more serious than anything before in his entire career at sea? Time would tell over the next 2 hours that the Titanic had left to live.